I'll show up over here. It's sexual streaming content.
And the ones that are on the thing there.
Yeah,
Whatever that's called. On your computer. We have quite a few announcements this morning. Well, what's her name? Oh, that usually makes the announcements. Ruby was going to take her sister to the doctor today, so she asked me if I could make the announcement. Take her sister to the doctor today, so she asked me if I could make the announcements for us. Mark and Vicky C. Everybody get a list. Okay, yeah, Mark and Vicky C. request prayers for their daughter-in-law Lisa and their family as she recovers from COVID. And she's at home, but she has a port, and they're having to put medication through that port. Desmond asked prayers for his dad, who had gallbladder surgery this week. And Trevor Hellman requests prayers for his father, mother, and daughter who are undergoing procedures. That would be bad for all of them at the same time, but I understand. Nancy Giles' sister-in-law is doing better, but still very weak, and she thanks you for all the prayers. And Kelly's friend and teacher, Maria Fernandez, is diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer and has started treatment. And Sarah's friend, Kathy, is cancer-free but still needs prayers for recovery from radiation. And Marvin and I request prayers for our daughter-in-law, Angela, who has stage 1 breast cancer. And she started radiation last week. And our granddaughter, Audrey, her daughter, will have knee replacement surgery in January because of the chemo that she went through when she had her cancer. So anyway, we appreciate all your prayers for them too. And of course, undergoing radiation is Jack's friend and Kalita Dogg's sister-in-law, Carol Bettis, in Portland. And of course, the ones that we have on our list to remember. And I was shocked. We got this, I just saw this morning when I got it, that LaVeda had passed away. And the arrangements are pending. And I know she's been sick for quite a while, but I didn't know, how bad she was. And we are going to have quilting after class today. And if you didn't bring a lunch, well, I've got some cookies, so you can have a cookie if you want one. And then I have a thing from Mamie that I would like to read to you. And it's a special prayer request for Ronell and Janice Wilson, members of the Lorraine Church of Christ. Ronell has had diabetes for years, had a leg amputated several years ago, had to go on dialysis a few months ago. Last Thursday, mail bulletin said he was home from the hospital after having all his fingers and both thumbs taken off. And so if anyone wants to send them a card, their address is here. And I will lay it over here if anybody wants to get the address and send them a card. So we have so many, that we need to pray for that it's just said. Painter will be leading our prayer this morning, and Julie will lead our singing. And I don't know about
Jean, yeah, I need to tell you about. They had problems having Thanksgiving with their family because of scheduling and somebody being sick and all like this.
Mm-hmm.
And finally today, they can all be together. So that's why she's not here. And, yeah.
Okay, who wants to go first?
You want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. I can do that. Please.
I see I'm still on the list for recovering from surgery, but I think I've recovered except for being able to get up out of the chair. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for our opportunity to study your word without any harm. Thank you for Sarah and her knowledge of the Bible. During this time of the year, it's so hard to hear somebody losing somebody or somebody sick. Please give us strength to get through. Watch over the needs of our brothers and sisters. In Jesus' name, amen.
Seven eight two. Trying to remember which ones I had done and not done was a little hard, so, but. Worthy of praises, Christ our Redeemer, worthy of glory, honor, and power, worthy of all our souls' adoration, worthy art thou, worthy art thou, worthy of righteous blessings and honor, worthy of wisdom, glory and power, worthy of earth and heaven's thanksgiving, worthy art thou, worthy art thou. Lift up the voice in praise and devotion, saints of all earth before worship bow, angels in heaven worship him, saying, worthy art thou, worthy art thou, worthy of righteous blessings and honor, worthy of wisdom, glory and power, worthy of earth and heaven's thanksgiving, worthy art thou, worthy art thou. Lord, may we come before thee with singing, filled with thy spirit, wisdom and power. May we ascribe thee glory and honor. Worthy art thou, worthy art thou, worthy of righteous blessings and honor, worthy of wisdom, glory and power, worthy of earth and heaven's thanksgiving, worthy art thou, worthy art thou.
And if you hadn't guessed it, Julie was at Disney World last week, so that's why we missed her. Open your Bibles to Hebrews 7. We're going to finish up chapter 7 and hopefully go into part of chapter 8 because they kind of go together. We almost finished chapter 7 last week. And I wanted to mention something to you right quickly. I think Gary had this announced Wednesday night. I wasn't here Wednesday night because at night is when I really get to feeling bad. And I'm doing a whole lot better now, which is, but our friend that we had on the prayer list, LaVonna Clinton, passed away Tuesday night. And I think he had that announced, but I just wanted to say a wee bit about her. She I worked and worked and worked trying to think of how to write something to the family, because she was a kind of an unusual person in a way, well, not really unusual. There are a lot of really good, dedicated Christian women that we have had association with. Lavana's mother did mission work by herself. She would go to Jamaica in particular several years, even when she had to have a wheelchair. She would go there and hand out literature and so on. And often on Lavana would go with her. And her mother passed away, I think, about 2 years ago. So her mother lived to a really good old age. But Lavana had COVID. Then she had hip replacement. And then they did a surgery for breast cancer and found that the cancer was basically all over her. And so she went on hospice care and passed away. But Lavana's house was an older double-wide mobile home. But her home was majestic. And you know that there's a difference between a house and a home, don't you? She opened her heart and her home to us and to other preachers, teachers, missionaries, and so on. And she was never saying, oh, look at the new cabinets I had put into my kitchen. Oh, would you look at the new furniture that I have? No, it was always, she was always talking about how we could encourage the kingdom, how we could do His will, and she was always interested in what was going on in your life and things that she could pray for. She was a good teacher and a good mom and just a good friend. And I thought about some of the women that I've known over the past. I think Jean Simpson didn't, I know Vernon knew Evelyn Sneed out in Idlewood. And Evelyn was like that. Her house was not the finest one on the block, But, I mean, you were always welcome there. You were always welcome. It didn't matter if sewing was piled up over here and laundry was over there. You were always welcome in her home. And I know that Marcia is, when she can be now, we're all getting a little older where it's harder to do, but I know Marcia has been like that and others of you, so I'm not just singling out her or whatever. But, it just made me realize that it's not so important, the physical building that we live in. That's not what's important. But what's important is the love that we share and the care that we have for one another. And I just think about that when I think of Lavana. And I don't know when her services are going to be or if they're going to have anything fairly major, because her husband is still recovering from COVID. And it's just been a tough year for that family. But anyway, you didn't come to hear me go on and on and on about people that I care about, because there are people like Levada that all of us care about that we've lost. And it is difficult, as Pam prayed, it's difficult this time of year when everything is to be enjoyable and yet you suffer a loss. December 7th, 1941, a lot of people suffered loss. December 7th, I think it was 1981, I believe that was it. We got the message that Gary's father was had a major stroke and was in ICU and probably wouldn't make it. So December 7th is kind of a big day. And that Christmas was tough, Christmas time is difficult when you have things like that going on. But we know that we have something, just like Mamie was talking about her friend there in LaGrange. But she was talking about how he always had such a positive attitude. And you can have that when you are in Christ, can't you? and when you have brothers and sisters in Christ that love you and care for you. And that's the one thing that we're going to kind of get into here. We did talk about Melchizedek last time, and I found some notes that if I'd found them last time, I would just have used them. But I found some notes that I did 15 years ago when I took this, and it was like you and I were talking this morning that I have things, I keep them, I file them, and then when I am looking for them, I can't find them. And so I was looking through my files late yesterday afternoon, and all of a sudden, this one showed up. I don't know why it didn't show up last week when I was looking through my files. But I want to give it out to you because, and we're just going to hit some of the highlights that I have in here. But there's the way that I say some things here. I thought, boy, that was a good thought. I wonder why I thought that then and didn't think that. Or I was trying to make the same point last week, but didn't make it as good as in these notes. And so I'm going to hand you these notes right now. I didn't want to put them out on the thing. You'll hand them out. Oh, okay. Let me keep one because Julie's my helper here. Minnie Mouse is my helper. And that's good. But, we talked about this last time, so I'm not going to go through everything on this, but I want to look down at number 6 on here. Because I think this is a better way to say what I was trying to say last week. And then there may be one or two things I want to point out over on the back. But on number 6, and I have very important, Melchizedek is made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually, and that's in verse 3. His priesthood, and this is, I think, important. His priesthood was fashioned after Jesus' priesthood. And I have some scriptures there that you can look to show that God had that plan and purpose even before the foundation of the world. And we know that. And sometimes we can parrot that, but sometimes looking at how God worked these things out may be a little, how we say it maybe not show that. But he foreknew the cross, he foreknew the work of Jesus, and he foreknew the church. He set up the Old Testament sacrificial system and the tabernacle as a shadow. And in the same way, God foreknew the priesthood of Christ. He foreknew the priesthood of Christ, and he set the priesthood of Melchizedek as the shadow, or the comparison to the priesthood of Christ, and the priesthood of Levi is the contrast. So you have God giving us a comparison and then a contrast. And God built the priesthood of Melchizedek to show or shadow the priesthood of Christ. He's a priest continually. You see, the priesthood, and I like the way I said this. I must have gotten this from somebody else smarter than I am, or maybe I just happen to have a good thought. But the priesthood stayed with Melchizedek. I think that's a better way of saying it. That priesthood stayed with Melchizedek, isolated there, and therefore stands forever. Just like the Passover or the brazen serpent, they're not here, but that the eternal prefigure is here, Okay. And the first time the word priest is used in the Old Testament is in relation to Melchizedek, so his priesthood predated the Levitical system. And also, he was a man, and that's why I think I mentioned last time that some commentators say he was an angel or whatever. No, he was a man, because that's what the Hebrew writer said. Consider how great this man was. And you see, this again is a contrast. The Jews thought of Abraham as great. You know what they say? We are Abraham's seed. We are Abraham's seed. But the Hebrew writer is saying, consider how great Melchizedek was. He's greater than Abraham. Why? Because he blessed Abraham. Abraham gave tithes to him. And he had a divinely appointed priesthood. Now, on the back are some things that we went over last time that you have in your notes. But I think it's number 8 on the back. I said, notice verses 17 and 21 in Hebrews chapter 7. We might go back to 16. Who has come, he's talking about another priest who has come, not according to the law of a fleshly commandment, you see, not by descent, but according to the power of an endless life. For he testifies, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, or in the same manner, or like Melchizedek. And then in verse 21, for they have become priests without an oath. You know, that the priest of Levi became priest without an oath. But he, with an oath, by him who said to him, again, you are, the Lord has sworn and will not relent, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And in number 8 there, I just note that and I say, a forever priest is an unchangeable, non-transferable, priesthood. And you say Melchizedek's priesthood was unchanging, not transferable, not transmitted to anybody else. You know, it stood there in time. As I said last week where I found that statement that God just drew back the curtain and then closed it. Why? To give us a picture of the priesthood, the high priesthood of Jesus. And because of that, you see, the law didn't give us that. But what did? Bringing in a better hope. Bringing in a better hope is what gives us that. And then I have, and we'll be looking in chapter 8 a little bit later at the better covenant. And the better covenant comes about because, as in verse 12, the priesthood being changed, of necessity there is a change in the law. But in number 11 on the back, I have what does that mean to me? And we talked about this a little bit last time. But in verses 25 through 28, and these are the ones that I wanted us to deal with more because we looked at the comparison contrast last time. But let's look at, I think, what did I say, 25 through 28? Yes. And, well, in fact, let's start with, I want to start with verse 20, okay? And insomuch as he was not made priest without an oath, for they have become priests without an oath, but he with an oath by him who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not relent, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. By so much more, Jesus has become a surety of a better covenant. A surety, a certainty of a better covenant. Later he'll say he's the mediator. In chapter 8, verse 6, he's the mediator of a better covenant. He has brought in that better covenant. And then in verse 23, also there are many priests because they were prevented by death from continuing. But he, because he continues forever, has an unchangeable priesthood. That is a permanent priesthood. A permanent priesthood. Therefore, in verse 25, and here's where I want us to spend the bulk of our time, and then in chapter 8 a little bit. Therefore, he is also able to do what? To save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives or ever lives to make intercession for them. That's his purpose. That's his purpose now. And he can save to the uttermost. That means that under any circumstance and from any sin and from any guilt, Jesus is able to save. And what did Paul say in 1 Timothy 1, verses 14 and 15? I think y'all probably know that. Paul said Jesus came to save sinners what? And what did Paul say about himself? Yeah, chief of the sinners. Oh, Paul? Yeah, look what he was doing. Have any of you ever done exactly what Paul was doing? Taking Christians, putting them in jail, having some of them killed, ravaging the church? But Jesus can save people. Jesus can save. But what did Paul have to do? Did Paul go on doing those things? You see, and there is the change in life that comes. The change in life that comes about because of that. But Jesus is able to save to the uttermost for those who come to God through him. And look back, I think I've got this marked at chapter 5, verse 9. Yeah. Jesus, having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who do what? Obey him. Yeah. And that's where Paul had to make that change and obey him. But he can save to the uttermost. He always lives, and he can save those who come to God through him. And that's the only way you come to God. What did Jesus say in John 14? I am the way, the truth, and the life. You know, he didn't say I know the way. He said I am the way. And there's a big difference there. One other thing that I was reading right quickly, because some of you may have friends that are Roman Catholic, or you may have friends that are Mormons or interact with some. They claim to have a priesthood that's according to the order of Melchizedek. But they pass the priesthood down from generation to generation. Is that according to the order of Melchizedek? Right there. And also, if you have to have a high priesthood, if you have to have someone else between you and God besides Jesus, doesn't that lower or say that Jesus' priesthood is not sufficient? Yeah, it says his priesthood is not sufficient. I was just reading that the other day. And so we just need to be aware of what people believe out here about priesthood. And of course, we are not high priests, but what are we? We're priests. We're a kingdom of priests to offer up spiritual sacrifices to God. And so when somebody talks about, well, I'm going to go confess to my priest, hey, you're a priest. You don't have to confess to some other priest. And you have that high priest mediating between you and God. And that's something that is so important. And it's important to help our friends out here in the denominational world understand. Same thing with saints, you know. And as I may have told y'all when we were in Rome, one of the tour guides was so excited to tell us that Rome had 2 saints. And I felt sorry for Rome. I thought, oh, you just got 2? We got a whole bunch of them in Fort Worth. You know? And I'm pretty sure there are more than just 2 in Rome. But you know how those words are used out there, and it's helpful for us to take those opportunities to help people see. But let's get back to what we were saying. He lives, we come to God through him, in verse 25, since he always lives or ever lives to make intercession. That's what he was designed to do. That's what he came to do, to make intercession for them. And in chapter 2, verse 18, that same idea, he comes to the aid of them. And that's the same word that's used, like taking them by the hand and leading them. The same word that was used of God when he took Israel by the hand to lead them out of Egypt. Jesus can come to the aid of us, taking us by the hand to lead us out to a better place. And it says, for such a high priest was fitting for us. Oh, this was the kind we needed. This was the kind we needed. Such a high priest was fitting for us, who is what? Holy, harmless, undefiled, and separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens. Now, I put this little note in here so I would have it all the time, but I want us to think about what some of that means here. Holy, harmless, undefiled, and separate from sinners. I don't know if I'll put this up here. Yeah, I think I'll put some of this up here, just since I erased the board so I can use the board. But holy, what does that? Holy is a quality that sets a person apart. It's an intrinsic, that is an internal quality. An internal quality that sets a person apart. And also makes them worthy of worship. Oh, I guess you can read that, I don't know. And it's the nature of God. Holiness is the nature of God, but what did he say to us? Be ye what? Holy. Why? Yes, because God. Now, can I have that internal, intrinsic quality that makes me worthy of worship? No, but I can come to be more like God. Come to be more like God. And we do become like the God we worship. We do become like the God we worship. And I think that's important let's see. Yeah, that's important in our walk in life. In fact, you may remember the high priest's garment and the mitre that he wore on his head. What was written up there? You remember? Holiness to the Lord. Holiness to the Lord. So when the high priest, was dressed in all of that, holiness to the Lord was what was on his head. And what about all of those vessels that were to be used in the tabernacle? Weren't they set apart as holy to the Lord? But what was the difference in them? What was it? Was it the gold that was used to make them any better than the gold that was used to make some pot in somebody's house? But what was different was that these were set aside for service to God. And what's different about us, we are set aside for service to God. And God wanted them to learn. In fact, many of the laws of the clean and unclean animals and so on like that. Now, a lot of those were for health, as we noted, but he also says that you may learn to distinguish between what's holy and what's common, what's clean and what's unclean. And then we do that with our children. I still remember doing that with Tanya in that little house, the preacher's home in Idlewood. There was a little shelf over here going from the dining room into the kitchen, and a little shelf over here going from the dining room into the kitchen. And Tanya was one of these, and she was going to get into everything and look at it and examine it and play with it, worse than any kid I've ever had. Peyton wasn't that bad. He had some other flaws, but I finally put some of her toys on one side, and I put some things that if she broke them, they weren't going to upset me, but that were mine on the other side. And when she'd start playing with mine, I'd, no, not Tanya's. And this is Tanya's. This is holy, this is common. And didn't you do something like that with your children? You don't touch this. This belongs to mother. and you don't touch this, this belongs to someone else. And I know we could go to people's houses and I could see her little eyes and her hand just wanting to touch something. And I would say, no, not Tanya's. And, oh, okay, you know. But the children of Israel had to learn that. They were children in terms of their knowledge of God and of God's will. And so he was teaching them. He was teaching, but he was also teaching us. He was teaching us that there's a difference between the holy and the common. And we are to be holy, for he is holy. And I could go on forever on that, and I could too. He's also harmless. Harmless. And harmless. He's unstained by. He's unstained, and this is toward men. He's harmless toward men. Did Jesus ever do anything that was horribly hurt somebody? Was that, he went about doing what? Doing good. Yeah, that was, he is holy, harmless, or innocent. That's another. I don't know why I'm writing it up there. I'm writing it, but I'm not really how to read anyway. He was without sin, but he did share in our flesh, didn't he? He shared in our flesh, so he can understand, but he's able to help. And notice the next thing it says, he's separate from sinners. Separate from sinners. Separate from sinners. Now, Paul says in 1 Corinthians somewhere that he was made to be sin for us. So he's not out of touch. He's not out of touch. And why is he not out of touch? Because he did experience flesh. So he's not out of touch with us, but he's not here wallowing around with us. And that's my definition there. And one of the things that I've seen, and that many of you have probably seen too, is such a casual view of Jesus, such a casual view. And but Jesus is separate. And I got to think about this, and you've heard this this illustration used before. But let's just suppose that all of us are sinking in, let's say just quicksand, are sinking in, let's say just quicksand, horrible quicksand, and we're all sinking down. Do you want somebody else in the quicksand to try to save you? You want somebody whose feet are firm on the ground, or somebody who is up on a hill or a mountain away from all of that to throw out the lifeline. You don't want somebody down. And I have seen this so much. I saw it a lot among some of our teenagers when I was at Fort Worth Christian, and then when I went to TCC, I would see kids with T-shirts on. You know, one had "Jesus is my houseboy." If they knew what a houseboy was, Jesus is not my servant. And I may have told y'all about this one, but one time I saw this girl, and she was in Peyton's class, and she was coming down the hallway, and she had on a T-shirt that looked like Budweiser logo at a distance. And I was ready to send her to the office because they weren't supposed to wear stuff like that. When she got closer, I really wanted to send her to the office, but I knew that it would be not a good thing. because of the viewpoint in the office, but her t-shirt had "Bud Wise Up. This blood's for you." And I thought, okay, so we are equating the blood of Jesus with alcohol? Is that? And it just really, it just really bothered me. But I see that, I was at a women's, I was asked to speak at a ladies' retreat in McKinney, where Tom Gomer used to preach there. And he told me, though, that the church was kind of stressing out, and he said, and so I was asking him kind of what type of lessons that he thought they needed, because I wanted to, and he was telling me something about it. Well, when I got there, there was one woman came to me afterwards, and she said, "Oh, we've always taught that Jesus was way above us, but now we're teaching that he's down and he's just our friend and all. And I think this is just wonderful, And I was thinking, okay, how can I address this? So in the next lesson, I said something about, we have a hard time with some of the words that are used describing Jesus. Jesus is our king. Hey, Americans, we don't want a king. We're not going to bow to a king. No. So we don't understand the idea of Jesus as our king. Jesus is our older brother. I have an older brother. He kicks me, I'll kick him back. I did one time, kicked him in the shin. I had on some good, what were those sacklots, remember wearing those? I gave him a good firm kick. He had bruised for a long time. But, we don't understand the older brother. And I may have used one or two other examples, but then I went to shepherd and sheep. I said, that's the one we can't mess up. All the others we can kind of mess up, but that one is hard to mess up. He's the shepherd. He's the one who leads. He's the one out there in front. He's the one we're to follow. And the shepherd doesn't get down and wander off with the sheep and play with them and all like this. No, the shepherd takes care of them. And the shepherd desires that they follow him. Now, if a sheep goes astray, what does the shepherd do? He goes to get them. He takes care of them. But Jesus is separate from sinners, but he's not out of touch. He understands, he knows, and that's important to us. And the other thing is he's higher than the heavens. You see, and here's the other thing, if Jesus were down here wallowing with us, he wouldn't be able to help us, would he? If he's just, good old buddy, let's go play together. But is he there when I'm playing? Yeah, he is, but there's a difference there in our thinking. And made higher than the heavens, higher than the heavens. He's serving now in the heavenly tabernacle. He's serving in the heavenly tabernacle. That was his purpose. And because he is serving in that heavenly tabernacle as a high priest, and he goes through, the writer goes through here in verses 27 and 28 to use a comparison of the Day of Atonement. We talked about that just a little bit last time. But it says he does not need daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifices first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. So that's a new sacrifice, offering up himself. And the law appoints as high priests men who have weakness. Do we want a high priest who is weak? Okay. But the word of the oath, which came after the law, appoints the Son who has been perfected forever. That is, he has been fitted for this purpose. And we learn back, I think in chapter 5, that he learned obedience through his suffering. He's been fitted for this purpose then, to serve as our high priest. So I have down here verse 11, not verse 11, number 11 on the back, and then we'll go into chapter 8. What does this all mean to me? Well, when we look at verses 25 through 28, we can know that salvation is sure, that his intercession is sure, that he is a high priest like we need. He was appointed by oath and perfected, and I have several verses there that we've referred to earlier in Hebrews, and therefore we can have victory, we can have assurance, we can have hope, and we can have joy because we have grace to help in time of need. Grace to help in time of need. And then as we go on into chapter 8, and really I don't know why they put a chapter division here, but he says, now this is the main point of the things we are saying. Okay, I've been saying all this, here's the main point, he says. Here's the main point. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the majesty in the heavens. That's where he is. That's where he is. When did he go there? When he ascended back to the Father. And he was seated in the majesty of the heavens at God's right hand. And notice he's seated. We made this point earlier, I think in Hebrews 1. In the tabernacle, there was furniture, but there was not a chair because the work of the high priest was never finished. There was no place to sit down. But you see, Jesus finished the work, and he sat down. And his work is finished. His work is finished. He's sitting at the right hand of the majesty, and he's a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, that heavenly one, which the Lord erected and not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Again, that was the purpose of that sacrificial system, to offer gifts and sacrifices. And therefore, it was necessary for this one also to have something to offer. And he goes on again in verse 4 and said if he was on earth, he would not be a priest. So again, he's referring back to that. And why he's writing to Hebrew Christians, he's writing to those who might want to go astray and go back into that Judaism, and yet it helps us to know and be assured that yes, God had a purpose all through. The unity of the Bible is amazing when you really get down and dig into it. The unity of the Bible is just amazing, and that's one of the things that I try to emphasize in my teaching, that the unity is amazing. But Christ's priesthood here, in verses 4, in verse 4 in particular, if he were on earth, he would not be a high priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law. And you see, Christ's priesthood is different. It's a different order. It's in a different realm. It has a different service and a different offering. But all of that was a shadow. And it says in verse 5, he says it again, who serve the copy and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, see that you make all things according to the pattern shown you in the mount. But now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, inasmuch as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which is established on better promises. Let's go back to verse 5, because I want to ask a question. He said these things serve as a copy and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, see that you make it according to the pattern shown you in the mount. Why was it important for Moses to make it according to the pattern? God told him to. Yeah. We're supposed to do what God says. Is there another reason?
Well, God had it all laid out like He wanted it,
Yeah, he had it all laid out.
and He wanted it done the way He wanted it done.
The way he wanted it done. Huh? I'm looking at a little red-headed boy in my 4th grade class. I kept asking that question. And finally, he got real excited and raised his hand. And he said, oh, because of what God had planned in the church and for Jesus. Yeah. See, God had showed Moses the real thing. And he said, now, make it according to that pattern because of what it... And all of you knew that, and you were kind of wanting to say that, but you didn't know exactly how to say it. But that was because of what it foreshadowed. Because of what it foreshadowed, it had to be made according to the pattern. It had to be. And I still remember Ben, and I'd like to take him down and shake him because he's not faithful to the Lord anymore. But he could grasp things quicker and as a 4th and 5th grader than I've seen anybody except maybe Tanya, and I want to shake her too. Can't do that. But that's why these things served as a copy or as a shadow of the heavenly things. So they better be right, hadn't they? Because of what they foreshadowed. Because of those heavenly things. They had to be right. And I think maybe that was kind of what you were trying to put together, you know. And all of us were kind of thinking, but, and you didn't say it with the words I wanted you to say. Yeah. Sometimes I tell my students out at the college, if I could make my questions match their answers, we'd probably get along a little better. But that's important there, and that's what I wanted us to end on, because then we'll go into the better covenant next time, and we'll see. You see, the old was a dim shadow, and again, that can help us know that there is a God, and that can help us know that this word is true and right. And I see it a lot of times, and I'm A-okay with all the archaeological evidence out there. I'm fine with that. I think that's great. Granddaddy always said that archaeology doesn't prove the Bible proves archaeology. And why did he say that? Because a lot of times to find out where to dig, to find something, you had to go to the Bible to find out where to dig to find it. And he would say the same thing about science. And I'm glad that we have all this scientific evidence out there. But a lot of times, you know, it's hard to understand what do they mean by the second law of thermodynamics and all that kind of stuff. That may be hard for you to understand. But it's not hard to understand shadow and substance. It's not hard to understand God's eternal plan and purpose. And that this book is the only book that has that kind of unity. Okay, we have another song, don't we? Hey, you got about 6 minutes.
669.
Is there something else I can help with?
Punch the wrong button. No.
669.
669.
669.
This is my Father's world, and to harvesting ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the Spirit. This is my Father's world, harvest field of God, of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. Oh, the beloved forget, but though the wrong seems all so strong, God is our ruler yet. This is my Father's home. Why shall my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let heaven ring. God reigns on earth, be glad.
You were both stuck in my head this morning, so it worked.
And you guys are going to quilt today. And I'm going to go home and make out to